Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we have a special video, as you can see from the title. I'm joined by Mr. Dawson Li. Now, I believe that Dawson and I are the only two individuals to have represented the Trudeau boys volleyball team at OFSA and then go on to study at Ivey Business School. If there's anyone else out there who has done those, please let me know. I want to hear from you. But I'm very proud to be part of this pipeline that I talk about in the podcast and being able to carry on the legacy that Dawson started. I think it's really important to be able to find people that you share things in common with, especially groups that you're proud and grateful to be a part of. Now, without any further ado, let's hop right into the podcast.
How are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on here. We really appreciate your time. To give a quick background on Dawson, you graduated in 2016. You're very involved with the school. We'll talk about that later. You did a lot of extracurriculars. You then went on to study business at Ivey Business School at Western University, and now you're working as a consultant on the Mastercard data and services team. Did I get that all right?
That's right.
Backwards. Okay. What kind of made you, go into the business world? What were some big events in high school that kind of led you on this path?
Yeah, for sure. I think for most of high school, I actually wanted to go into engineering. So I was pretty interested in the sciences. I had a lot of fun in grade 11 with chemistry and physics, and I thought, hey, this is something that every Asian family would love. And I think it's a pretty solid job. I think I actually had a conversation with my dad saying I wanted to go into engineering, and he was like, we actually went up to a university and saw their civil engineering program, which is what I was planning on applying to. And my dad looked at me and was like, I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't know if you would really enjoy looking at or building concrete for 4 years. It seems like that's what they really love. And I don't think you'll do it. And I was like, okay, Dad, I really want to prove you wrong, but I think you might be right. So I think with that in mind, he was like, I think you should actually pursue business. You can talk to some other people around this too. And I know some of your friends are interested in business. Take a look and see if you actually like this. And see what you want to do. So I think that was the first step in terms of, okay, maybe I don't want to do engineering, or maybe I should listen to my dad. I think as I was kind of going on and studying as well, I realized that, I took a business course or economics just to kind of see if I enjoyed that. Capital markets, I think with Shields, I don't know if he's still there. And I realized this was really interesting. And honestly, just as interesting as I found chemistry and physics. And I was also doing pretty well in those. At a certain point, when it came to applying for universities, I was looking at my grades and was like, hey, my grades are not the greatest. I don't know if I'll actually get into a great engineering school. I think I would rather pursue an average level or maybe a better business school. And that way, at least my career hopes might be a bit higher, because I thought, and could be really wrong, I still don't really know if this was the right answer, but I felt a lower, maybe a not as well-known engineering school might actually be worse than just an average business school. So if anyone on the podcast wants to prove me wrong, happy to chat more about that. But that was my mindset in high school. Ended up applying even to Ivey just on a whim. I didn't really think I would get in. And when I did get in, it was even with my parents, we were discussing hey, we don't really know if you'll get through this. Pretty prestigious. Just try it out. If you don't get in with AEO or whatever, it's all good. But it was really just for us, hey, see what you can do, try your best. If you can't, it's okay, but we want you to at least say that you tried pursuing something more difficult. And so that's kind of what got me started and deciding to pick Western.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Western definitely not a average business school, by the way. Yeah. I'm assuming you don't have any regrets about that. You enjoyed your 4 years at Western?
Yeah, Western was great. I think there's always a, what if, obviously, okay, what if I pursued this? And I think especially at Western, where there was an option of doing a dual degree. Had I known that, I think I definitely would have tried to pursue that with engineering. But because I kind of turned 180 really quickly in December, I didn't finish the prerequisites and I ended up dropping physics in my second semester of grade 12. So I never really could have applied into the engineering school. So that'll always be a what if for me, but definitely enjoyed the 4 years at Western.
So would you say your parents were your biggest influence on choosing your path?
Yeah, I think they were definitely a lot larger than I thought in high school in terms of the influence. I think friends had also played a big part. I ended up having a lot of like close friends also go into business. So I think that also kind of helped in terms of deciding what to do there.
Okay, so working backwards, do you have any like standout high school experiences? So you were very involved, you played on sports teams, you were in the music council, just name a few. Do you have any like standout moments that you kind of think about?
Yeah, there's a couple. I think I was on student council for 2 years. I think that was really fun. I think that was like the first experience in terms of being able to actually see like like your works on like a larger scale. So being able to plan something like Blazers Bash, or like actually working with contracting to get like an actual artist in. I think that was really interesting and really like a very unique experience. I think, Nate, similar to you, like just playing volleyball. Like volleyball was something that I'd never played before in high school. It was just, I remember like it was on a whim when we first created like the junior volleyball team. That was in my grade 10 year, and they were like, hey, you should play. Like you did really well in gym class. And I had no experience, not even really like a strong interest, but I was like, okay, like sounds like something fun. And I think that led to like a 3-year career in high school volleyball. We also ended up being, I think, the first team that made it to OFSA, which was pretty crazy for us. Like that was always the dream, but it was tough because it hadn't been achieved at Trudeau. So definitely something that we still celebrate. I still actually keep up with some teammates there as well. So definitely fond memories being on that team.
Right. I mean, yeah, you talked about it. Like, I guess you're like my predecessor, I guess, in that sense. No, OFSA is a great experience, right? And some of the crazy things that happen, it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? What would you say your biggest like learning point was in high school? What's something you take with you?
Yeah, I think it's like two things, or yeah, I think I can't really answer with just one. I think one, I think is like I think for me, it was like learning how to study and also learning how to like use even like resources well. So I think at Trudeau, you're surrounded by so many like incredibly smart people. And I felt like I definitely was not like close to a lot of these people in terms of like how smart they were, like how academic they were. And so a lot of like my studying like revolved being around like group studying and actually just figuring out like, okay, like how did you come to this conclusion, or like how were you able to explain some of these things and understand how they kind of thought about it. And that actually helped like reinforce my own learning, where I didn't really understand how this made sense, but hearing it from you and then potentially doing whatever like Googling to help really understand it really solidified my foundation. So I think that was one thing, like just being able to rely on your friends, but also two, kind of picking like what you like and what you don't like in high school. I feel like it's such a formative time where I think similar to even like Western, right? You get caught up in terms of like doing all these things that you want to do. And there's only so much time that you have to commit to clubs, or there's only so many sports that you can play. Which ones do you pick and why? And how do you decide between those two, right? Like you have these opportunities to play all these different things, different people and different coaches. Like why do you stick with certain things? Like why do you stick with volleyball, or why did you stick with or drop certain other sports? Why did you pick clubs, or want to actually be like execs in certain clubs versus others? There's a lot to kind of learn in terms of time management, and I think that's pretty underrated in high school.
But do you have like an example of a time where you kind of had to decide and you kind of had to weigh your options?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me it was kind of deciding, hey, there's only so much time that you have after school, or like there's only so much time that you have to like, even pick a club. For me, it was like deciding between volleyball and basketball. Like I think I realized by like grade 12 that I could really only commit to one sport and really practice that without like my grades tanking. And given like you're practicing like 2 to 3 times a week, in addition to traveling for games, I realized that it was unsustainable to play both sports in grade 12 and like not suffer some sort of academic consequence. I decided picking volleyball earlier. I think that was for me it was like the team, like I'd gotten really close to the team and the coach. We were really excited about trying to actually do well. And I think it was also with it was really hard decision for me because I grew up playing basketball. That was always like the sport that I enjoyed the most. But I recognized that, hey, I may never play volleyball again. just knowing that like I wouldn't pursue this in university. It's hard to pick up, a team of 6 all the time and play drop-in, but it's pretty easy to play like drop-in basketball, like compete in basketball and like intramurals. So I decided, hey, I'm gonna pick volleyball this time. It'll probably be something that I won't, play as a organized sport again, but I'll probably be able to play basketball in the future. So that was kind of my decision.
All right, we should definitely have an alumni tournament one day.
Yeah, I think they used to have those when I was in school. Like we would play some alumni. I don't know where that went with COVID, but I think it's there. It still exists.
Yeah, I'll try to organize it for sure. All right, moving on to like your university days. Did you have like almost like a culture shock when you got to Western? Like, how was the adjustment there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got put into, so I didn't know anything about Western when I only knew the culture was like, hey, this is like a party school, but I didn't know like, and I'm sure you didn't know, or maybe you knew this as well, but like each residence in these schools have like a different culture. And I picked my residence off just like the cheapest options or like the closest proximity to my potential classes. So I picked a traditional residence that wasn't soggy. Like that was my 2 criteria. And that was it. And so I ended up being slotted into MedSid, which is like one of the farther residences. It was traditional, and it looks like it hasn't been renovated since like the 80s, I'd say. So I think for a lot of people who were maybe private school or had like a better idea of what the culture was, like they came in like ready to go. Like this was something that they were looking forward to, that their parents had been telling them about. Like it was such a great experience for them to like relive some of those things. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I have no idea who these people are, like what these songs that they're like really vibing to are, like all this whole drinking culture, like all of that was such a crazy shock to me. And I think it took a while for me to adjust to that. And like even like in terms of like how we make friends, right? Like I think at Trudeau, like people are pretty academically focused and like really care about, like they realize that, hey, we can play hard, but like we'll stop for like our grades. But some of these people like do not stop there or like have like some crazy schedules. And I was just very shocked by that. And that definitely took like a pretty long time for me to adjust to.
Were you looking at other schools for business? What were some of the considerations that you had?
Yeah, I was pretty set on going to Laurier before like this whole like before like, getting into Western. So I thought that would have been pretty fun where we had a lot of friends, or like in my class that year, a lot of people were going to Waterloo. So I was like, hey, like I can live with them. Like it seemed like it was a pretty like nice university town, and I had a lot of friends kind of pursuing both like Waterloo and Laurier anyway. So that was one of the main considerations. I think I was also looking like I had applied to Queens, but didn't get into Queens. And then I think one of the other ones that I was also looking at was like U of T. They have a sport, or they have like a co-op program in their Scarborough campus that I thought that would have been pretty useful to get like some co-op reps. The only program that I didn't apply to in business was actually like a sports broadcasting kind of program, which I thought was really interesting. Just given like the background that like and interest that I had in sports, I was like, hey, if I can't be an athlete, at least I can be on like TSN. And I thought that would have been pretty cool. So that was like the one like fun thing that I applied to as well.
What are some like big memories you have at Western that stand out to you?
Yeah, I ended up playing, I don't know how I got roped into this because we clearly don't have a football team, but I got roped into residence flag football at MedSid. So that was really interesting for me, like learning how to play football in like early January, like outside, like that was absolutely crazy. And then being able to play, like we played our games on like the big TD stadium. So like where the Mustangs football team actually plays. And we actually won that, which was also crazy. But yeah, that was really fun, just like learning how to play that. I think a lot of my fond memories are just like in the interactions that I had with other students and other people. Like I realized there were a lot of people that, actually follow similar paths growing up, but never are really able to share. Like I wouldn't have been able to meet them otherwise. That could be, people from other high schools, like in Markham, or even like other high schools in Mississauga that I found like we had very similar upbringings. So I thought that was really interesting. Even like club highlights, where I was involved in like our student fellowship, which was really nice. I was involved with what else? Like some other clubs, like even like the consulting club, just like being involved and like learning more from other people and just being able to pick their brain, I think was also really interesting.
Mm-hmm. What were some of like the biggest things that you learned being at IVEY? What can you kind of say about the program? You mentioned before it's a prestigious program. Going into it, what were kind of your thoughts and what did you take out of it the most?
Yeah, I think like you kind of mentioned, IVEY is one of those places where like the network is or yeah, I guess you mentioned earlier maybe offline, like the network is where it I think IVEY really plays the strongest factor. And a lot of times that network really only shines outside of school, like once you graduate. And I think like in school, what that kind of looks like is just being able to actually like pick people's brains and just kind of ask them why they think they're certain ways or why like their logic came out to a certain way. Just being able to rely and find like a group of people that you can trust to like share information on or to kind of grow together is something that I think is really unique to IVEY. And I feel like what you really get out of IVEY is a lot of those soft skills. So like being able to like speak to people, being able to ask the right questions, being able to look polished and present yourself in front of interviews or for calls. It's a lot of these things that a lot of places or a lot of universities may focus on the actual hard skills of, can you build a financial statement? Can you find exactly what's wrong with your accounting, like ledger versus like, I think IVEY really focuses on how can you share these things and how can you really figure out like what the details are behind like a case, right? Like sure, the prompt may say one thing, but actually like the solution is something completely different. And how do you come to that conclusion? So it's a lot of critical thinking and soft skills versus, and I think it's really unique to IVEY versus a lot of other business schools out there.
Right. And then so now you're in consulting, right? What have been kind of your biggest takeaways, but also like your best memory and something that you really enjoy about the job?
Yeah, I think consulting is like one of those classic exits outside of IVEY. And I think a lot of people do try and pursue it. I've enjoyed, being able to work on a variety of different projects and also see some of those actually play out. A fond memory is like, I'll share is like my first client trip. So I started working consulting in COVID and like I didn't get to travel very much. So I'd been working with this client for quite some time now. And then they flew us down just into Chicago to meet the client and also to kind of share like our findings on like for the past couple of months. And so being able to actually meet their clients in person, we grabbed like dinner together. It was very interesting to kind of see almost like the world that we kind of missed out on. I think you could say the same where in the 2 years where you missed school, like whether that was high school, university, like wherever, you miss out on a lot of like the social interactions and how you can kind of grow as a person. And a lot of how you get close to people is in like those really like small talk conversations where you find out interests or things that you can share with each other. And I think that was something that I really like valued about being able to actually, meet my team and meet the client and actually build like a strong connection with them. So that's something that was really fun and definitely a highlight. I would say also like the team here at Mastercard is really fun. Like the office is really young, which I think is not something that when I was first recruiting was ever like a factor. What I realized with like people who are the same age with you is oftentimes they share similar interests, and that means that you can hang out after work or like pursue those interests together. So like we're playing intramural ultimate frisbee as like an office, which I think is not something that a lot of offices have the time or like the personnel to do. But that's something that we are enjoying in terms of like being active, and I think that allows us to have fun and be closer friends at work, but also friends outside of work as well.
Yeah, starting to wrap up now. You mentioned before, do you have any like exit plans, any aspirations like in 10 years? What kind of things do you want to be able to achieve?
Yeah, I think in the next couple of years, I think like the economy like could take off, and I really have no idea like where it's gonna go. For me personally, I think I'm not sure what I would do in 10 years, but I definitely have enjoyed like my work in analytics, and so hopefully continue to do some work there. Whether that's at Mastercard somewhere else, I'm not really sure yet, but definitely continue to work in like a lot of data and a lot of analytics and making sure that whatever decisions I drive is very data driven.
Would you consider getting an MBA?
I personally have not really considered getting an MBA. I think personally, like the IVEY undergrad does a really good job, and I think with the actual IVEY MBA program, one thing that I guess like in my unique situation, I was supposed to go on exchange in 2020, and when that got canceled, I ended up having to take some courses at IVEY, and some of those courses to accelerate myself so that I could graduate on time was to take it at the MBA level. And I found that there were a lot of similarities between the IVEY undergrad and MBA level, which I felt like it might be a bit redundant to do the IVEY MBA. So I think the only thing that I would really consider in terms of an MBA is like a top 10 like US school, which I don't know if I would really pursue. Just like it's like, yeah, everyone wants to do their MBA at like Harvard, but is that realistic to me? I'm not really sure, like in terms of like my academics, but I think that would be the only, like those top 10 schools would really only be like my considerations for the MBA. But given the amount of like the cost, like the amount of studying and all that to kind of go in, like I'm not sure if that's worth it for me.
Right. Yeah, I think you mentioned it. Like IVEY's kind of, once you're there, there's no point in going like kind of like a lateral move if you were to do it at IVEY, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think if I wanted to pursue like further education, like I would want to go to maybe like a more reputable school, or like at least live out certain things that like I never got to do at Western. So one thing that like I didn't know is like how big the NCAA is for like these college schools. And so being able to experience that, for example, would be something that I would want to do in my MBA, right? Like not necessarily like the tailgate, but even just like, what is the hype around, some NCAA sports, or like actually having a team to cheer for like March Madness, right? So that's something that we don't get in Canadian schools, but would be really cool to kind of experience if I went to an American one.
Yeah, I agree. I've thought about it too a little bit. All right, last question for you. If you could nominate another PET grad to be on the podcast, who would it be?
Yeah, so I'll nominate two. Just like I think one is pretty similar to me. Her name is Emily Yao. You might have seen her. She graduated my year as well. We have pretty similar career paths, but I think she has a different. She'll have a different like mindset when it comes to this. Like we both followed very similar paths up until a few years ago. So we were at PET together, we went to IVEY together, we started at Mastercard together, and she ended up leaving to pursue a tech role. So I think she would have a different perspective, even though our lives were followed the same path for like 10 years. How we like even were about in like high school and university were very different. And so it would be interesting for you to hear her perspective. Somebody else, I think it would be interesting for you to actually, I'm not sure like who you've reached out to in terms of alumni, or like where their paths are. I'll ask that back. Like, is there any like specific industry or like area that you might be curious about, and I can maybe recommend someone there?
Tech world's interesting, finance world, we've had a few consultants talk to. Yeah, just anyone that you think would benefit the greater community.
Yeah, maybe you can reach out to Christopher Louis. So he's someone that we played volleyball together with. He was our star setter. He is currently in San Francisco working at Apple, and was a software, and I think he was a computer or like electrical engineer at Waterloo. So he would have a very different role than or a path than I did. But yeah, he's a great friend, and I think he would love to chat.
Okay, perfect. I'll reach out to them. So wrapping up now, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate your time and hearing your insights. Going from high school, being so involved, and going to IVEY. Obviously, we're biased on the podcast. We love IVEY. To being a consultant now, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any final remarks?
No, nothing for me. Yeah, I hope if you guys have any questions, like feel free to reach out. I think the amount of people that went through Trudeau, like there's like a lot of really strong people. And so definitely leveraging this network will be really helpful for like future generations, but also like as we connect with each other and see where people are, even like 5-10 years down the road, like there might be some interesting overlaps there as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week. Peace out.